The rain fell so hard that morning it blurred the streets into a sea of silver. Every sensible person had already rushed indoors, but one exhausted single father kept walking through the storm with a worn toolbox in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. He had lost his career, his reputation, and almost every ounce of hope he had left. Yet he refused to stop visiting the lonely old man next door who depended on him every single day. What he never imagined was that the front door would open, not to the elderly neighbor he expected, but to the powerful CEO who had destroyed his life months earlier. In that frozen moment, both men realized fate had been quietly writing a story neither of them could escape. Before we continue, if you believe kindness always finds its way back, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Spread Love Daily. Your support helps us share more stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Gideon Marsh had never imagined that life could collapse so quickly. Just 8 months earlier, he had been a respected senior maintenance supervisor at one of the city's largest engineering companies. His hands had repaired machines worth millions, trained younger workers, and solved problems others considered impossible. More importantly, that steady paycheck allowed him to raise his 10-year-old daughter, Hazel, after his wife passed away from a sudden illness. Every morning before work, he braided Hazel's hair the best he could, packed her lunch, and promised that everything would be all right, even when he wasn't completely sure himself. Then came the corporate restructuring. The new CEO, Alastair Rowe, arrived with ambitious plans to modernize the company. Numbers suddenly mattered more than loyalty. Experience became an expense instead of an asset. Departments were reorganized, hundreds of workers were reviewed, and one misunderstanding changed Gideon's future forever. A machine malfunction caused millions in damage. Although later reports quietly suggested multiple system failures, Gideon became the convenient person to blame. Within one afternoon, 20 years of dedicated service disappeared inside a brief termination meeting. His security badge stopped working before he even reached the parking lot. Finding another job wasn't easy. Companies saw his dismissal and refused to ask questions. Bills multiplied while savings disappeared. Gideon accepted temporary repair jobs, fixed broken appliances, painted fences, and worked long hours wherever someone needed honest labor. Some weeks he barely earned enough to keep electricity running. Yet every evening he returned home smiling because Hazel deserved a father who gave her hope instead of fear. Across the narrow street lived an elderly widower named Cedric Holloway. At 79 years old, Cedric struggled to walk without assistance. His wife had passed away years earlier, his children lived overseas, and visitors had become painfully rare. Gideon first met him when he noticed newspapers piling up outside the porch. Concerned, he knocked on the door and found Cedric collapsed after slipping in the kitchen. From that day forward, helping Cedric simply became part of Gideon's routine. Every morning before searching for work, Gideon mowed the old man's lawn, repaired loose boards, carried groceries, changed light bulbs, cleaned gutters, and checked that the heater worked properly. Sometimes Hazel joined him after school, reading novels aloud while Cedric smiled with tears quietly gathering in his tired eyes. The lonely house slowly filled with laughter again. Cedric often insisted on paying, but Gideon always refused. He knew loneliness couldn't be measured in dollars. He also understood what it felt like to lose everything important. Weeks became months. Their friendship grew stronger. Neighbors began noticing the quiet kindness happening every day without cameras, applause, or social media posts. Gideon never expected recognition. Helping someone simply felt like the right thing to do. One sunny afternoon Cedric asked a question that surprised him. He wanted to know why Gideon kept helping despite struggling so much himself. Gideon simply smiled and explained that his daughter watched everything he did. If Hazel learned that kindness depended on money, then she would grow into someone who helped only when life was comfortable. He wanted her to understand that character was revealed during hardship, not success. Cedric never forgot those words. Several days later Cedric's health suddenly declined. Doctors recommended full-time care at home. Nurses began visiting regularly, but Gideon still stopped by every single morning before work and every evening afterward. He fixed shelves, cooked meals, organized medications, and made sure the old man never felt abandoned. Then came the storm. Dark clouds swallowed the afternoon sky. Heavy rain flooded streets while fierce winds bent tree branches almost to the ground. Hazel begged her father to stay home because the weather looked dangerous. Still, Gideon picked up fresh bread, soup, and medicine before walking across the street. When he reached Cedric's porch, something immediately felt different. A sleek black luxury sedan sat in the driveway. Several expensive umbrellas rested near the entrance. The lights inside glowed brighter than usual. He knocked gently. Footsteps approached. The door slowly opened. Standing before him wasn't Cedric. It was Alistair Rowe, the CEO who had fired him. Time seemed to stop. Rain dripped from Gideon's soaked jacket onto the wooden porch while neither man spoke. Recognition spread across Alistair's face almost instantly. The confident executive who once dismissed Gideon without emotion now stared with complete disbelief at the exhausted father holding groceries and medicine. Confused, Gideon quietly wondered whether he had somehow come to the wrong address. Then Cedric appeared behind Alistair. The elderly man smiled warmly despite looking weak. Only then did the truth finally emerge. Cedric Holloway was Alistair Rowe's grandfather. Because of years of family disagreements and constant business travel, Alistair had rarely visited. He believed professional caregivers handled everything. He never realized his grandfather spent most days alone until doctors urgently contacted him after Cedric's condition worsened. During the previous several days, Cedric had spoken endlessly about one extraordinary man. A struggling single father who never asked for anything. A neighbor who showed up every morning. A man who quietly restored his faith in humanity. Alistair listened carefully. At first he assumed his grandfather exaggerated. Then he began reading journals Cedric kept beside his favorite chair. Page after page described Gideon's kindness. There were notes about repaired fences, shared dinners, laughter with Hazel, handwritten birthday cards, fresh flowers placed beside old family photographs, and countless moments no one else had witnessed. One journal entry stopped Alistair completely. It read that the finest leader wasn't the richest person in the room but the one who carried another person's burdens without expecting applause. Alistair felt something inside himself begin to crack. That evening he secretly requested Gideon's employment records. As investigators reopened archived reports, disturbing facts surfaced. Critical evidence had been ignored. Maintenance records had been incomplete. Management decisions had rushed the investigation. Gideon hadn't caused the accident at all. He had been sacrificed to protect quarterly profits. Standing there in the doorway, Alistair couldn't escape the weight of what his own leadership had done. Without saying much, he invited Gideon inside. The warm living room felt strangely familiar. Hazel's drawings still decorated the refrigerator. The repaired bookshelf Gideon built stood proudly against one wall. Every corner reflected months of quiet generosity. Cedric reached for Gideon's hand and thanked him once again, not only for fixing his house, but for filling it with life after years of silence. Before leaving, Alistair made a promise. Not because he wanted forgiveness. Because justice had waited far too long. Within days, the company publicly admitted its investigation had been deeply flawed. Gideon's termination was officially reversed. He received full compensation for lost wages, a promotion he had previously earned, and recognition for 2 decades of faithful service. Even more importantly, Alistair introduced sweeping changes inside the company. Independent investigations became mandatory before disciplinary actions. Employee support programs expanded. Leadership training emphasized compassion alongside performance. Hundreds of workers benefited from reforms inspired by one ordinary father's quiet integrity. Yet Gideon's greatest reward wasn't the restored career. It came weeks later when Hazel proudly stood beside him during a company community volunteer event. Watching executives paint homes, repair playgrounds, and serve meals alongside employees, she squeezed her father's hand and whispered that kindness really could change people. Gideon smiled. Not because life had finally become easy, but because his daughter had witnessed something more valuable than success. She had watched goodness outlast injustice. Months later, Cedric peacefully passed away with family surrounding him. In his will, he left Gideon an old wooden toolbox that had belonged to his late wife along with a handwritten note. It simply said that houses were built with nails and timber, but homes were built by people like him. Gideon kept that toolbox forever. Not because it was valuable, but because every scratch reminded him that the smallest daily acts of compassion often build the strongest legacies. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Spread Love Daily so together we can spread hope, kindness, and second chances around the world. Glowing Star special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness always comes back." Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't becoming successful again. Sometimes the greatest miracle is discovering that every unseen act of love plants a seed that one day grows into someone else's redemption, and, when the time is right, your own.